A tanker captain radioed a distress signal at 6:14 in the morning. By 6:17, he wasn't sure his ship was still afloat. By noon, 3 American aircraft carriers had changed course. And by midnight, the world had changed with them. This is not a story about a ceasefire. A ceasefire ended 11 days ago. This is a story about what replaces it. And what replaces it is something no diplomat has officially said out loud, something no press conference has described, and something Iran's own state media spent 4 hours too stunned to name. Here is what we know happened. Here is what we know America did next. And here, buried inside both, is the part that neither government wants you to understand yet. Stay with me. Because the next thing I tell you changes how you read everything after it. The ceasefire brokered through Islamabad had 3 components. Iran halts IRGC naval harassment in the Strait of Hormuz. America pauses offensive strikes against Iranian territory during the negotiating window. Commercial shipping resumes transit under mutual protection. Nobody called it a ceasefire publicly. Both sides wanted the same thing, a pause without the admission that they'd agreed to one. It held for 11 days, not because either side trusted the other, because both sides needed it. Iran needed the economic pressure to ease. The blockade was bleeding $500 million a day from an economy already hemorrhaging. America needed the space to refine its targeting and watch what Iran did when it thought the pressure had reduced. 11 days of watching, 11 days of listening, 11 days of refining every strike package that was already sitting on a commander's desk. And then, on day 11, the IRGC made a decision that someone in that chain of command will spend the rest of their life trying to explain. A larger formation of gunboats, more than the Day 9 probe, more boats, both shipping lanes simultaneously, approached 3 commercial vessels in formation. No radio challenge, no warning broadcast. They fired. Rounds hit the water close enough to the hull that the tanker captain later said he believed his ship had been struck. The vessel stopped dead. The other 2 reversed course. The 11 days were over. And in a command center you've never seen a photograph of, a set of response options that had been sitting in a pending file for exactly 11 days moved to the active file. If you want to understand how these decisions actually get made before the press briefings start, subscribe. We break the gap between what's said and what's real every time it matters. The American response was not improvised. That's the detail that gets lost when the coverage focuses on the gunboats. The response that followed was a plan, a sequenced, escalation-calibrated, phase-structured plan built during the 11 days of the ceasefire, precisely because every analyst working this problem understood the ceasefire was unlikely to hold. Phase 1. The Aegis destroyers holding position in the Gulf of Oman received new rules of engagement within minutes of the ceasefire break being confirmed. Pre-delegated authority. The on-scene commander no longer needed White House authorization for individual engagement decisions. That change happened fast, faster than any press statement, faster than any diplomatic note through the Swiss embassy, faster than any tweet from the National Security Advisor. Within the same hour, 2 FA-18 strike packages launched from the carrier deck, not toward Iranian territory, toward a position in international airspace that placed them within striking distance of the IRGC naval assets that had fired on the tanker. Positioning, not attack. But the IRGC commanders tracking them on radar understood exactly what the positioning meant. The boats withdrew. But the withdrawal was not the end of the American response, because what happened in the Strait was not a tactical accident. It was a strategic decision, made at a level above any boat commander by people who knew exactly what firing on a commercial vessel would trigger and chose to do it anyway. A decision made at that level demands a response at that level, and what that response looked like, so what it actually destroyed, and what it deliberately left standing, is the part of this story that tells you exactly where this crisis goes next. Stay with me. This channel exists for exactly these moments. If you're not subscribed, now is the time, because the follow-up to what I'm about to tell you lands in the next 48 hours. The targeting packages American military planners had been updating throughout the ceasefire period, refined with intelligence from the power grid failures, updated with signals gathered during the standoff itself, those packages executed. Not the full package, the first tier, Infrastructure directly connected to the IRGC's ability to operate in the Strait. The radar installation on Abu Musa Island, destroyed. Not degraded, destroyed. The fuel storage supplying fast attack craft with the operational range to reach the shipping lanes, destroyed and burning. The power generation feeding the Bandar Abbas naval complex, severely damaged, restoration measured in weeks. 3 target sets, 6 hours, precision munitions, aircraft that never entered Iranian territorial airspace. This was not symbolic. Every target was selected for a single purpose. Remove the specific infrastructure that gave IRGC gunboats the operational reach to do what they did at 6:14 that morning. The message delivered in munitions, not in diplomatic cables. You broke the ceasefire with your gunboats. We removed what made your gunboats dangerous. Iranian state media went silent for 4 hours. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of a regime that knows exactly what happened and hasn't yet decided what to say about it. When the silence broke, it broke through the foreign ministry. Not the IRGC, not the military, the diplomats. In Iran's institutional grammar, who speaks after a military event is as important as what they say. When the IRGC speaks, the regime is projecting strength. When the foreign ministry speaks, the regime is buying time. The foreign ministry called for international condemnation. It reserved the right to respond. It called the strikes a serious escalation. Notice what it didn't say. No retaliatory strikes announced. No Hezbollah activation. No strait closure. No ballistic missile forces elevated to readiness. The IRGC issued its own statement separately, promising bitter consequences, promising American forces in the region would face a reckoning. 2 statements, 2 institutions, 2 completely different tones aimed at 2 completely different audiences. The fault line running through Iran's decision-making is visible in that gap. Why did Iran break a ceasefire that was, by any reasonable measure, giving the regime exactly what it needed? Time, reduced pressure, international cover, 3 theories, all credible, possibly all true at once. Theory 1, the IRGC hardliner faction made a unilateral call. The institutional fracture that was visible before the ceasefire didn't heal during it. The hardliners who believe that demonstrating strength is the only viable strategy may have authorized the gunboat operation without clearance from the Supreme Leader's office, not disobeying orders, but operating within a standing authorization they believed covered exactly what they did. The civilian leadership woke up to a fact they couldn't undo. Theory 2, it was a deliberate test. The ceasefire had no verification mechanism, no joint monitoring, no specified consequence for violation. If America accepts the breach with a diplomatic protest, Iran learns the arrangement is asymmetric and exploitable. If America responds militarily, Iran collects intelligence on strike sequencing, weapon selection, and response timelines. Either outcome has information value. Theory 3, and this one lands differently. The blockade was bleeding $500 million a day, and it never stopped. The ceasefire paused IRGC harassment operations, Iran's primary leverage against the economic strangulation, while America kept the blockade running. The IRGC hardliners looked at that asymmetry and concluded, a ceasefire where we gave up our leverage in exchange for continued strangulation is not a ceasefire. It's surrender on a payment plan, and they refuse to keep paying. Here is the dimension that almost no coverage of this crisis has touched, and it changes the meaning of everything that just happened. The nuclear program did not pause for the ceasefire, not for a single day, and what Iran did with those 11 days may not have been about the Strait at all. American and Israeli intelligence tracked continued enrichment operations throughout the ceasefire period, continued centrifuge activity, continued movement of enriched material between facilities. The 12-day breakout estimate, the number that has been the drumbeat beneath this entire crisis, did not extend during the ceasefire. If anything, it compressed. Iran used the diplomatic environment of active talks, the reduced probability of Israeli or American strike action, the cover of ceasefire optics, and kept spinning. If the ceasefire was nuclear cover rather than genuine de-escalation, if Iran needed 11 days of reduced military pressure to reach an enrichment milestone, and then broke the ceasefire once it had, that realization is landing in American planning cells right now with the weight of something that fundamentally changes the urgency of the next decision. The window for meaningful military action against the nuclear program gets smaller every day, and the intelligence community just watched Iran use a ceasefire to compress it faster under the protection of diplomatic cover. That is the calculation American planners are staring at in real time. Here's where the president's position becomes genuinely difficult. Trump negotiated this ceasefire publicly, sent representatives to Islamabad on his authority. Iran broke it on the record in front of the world, firing on commercial vessels moving under the protection of an arrangement his administration brokered. The first-tier strikes were the correct response within the logic of the pressure campaign, but they created a new problem for Trump personally. His Truth Social ultimatum, every power plant, every bridge, is a documented presidential commitment. The first-tier strikes hit IRGC Strait infrastructure. They did not hit every power plant. They did not hit every bridge. Iran's hardliners will use that gap. Every intermediate response gets measured against the ultimatum, and every intermediate response falls short of it by definition. Meanwhile, Trump's domestic political calculus is shifting. His base does not want a prolonged Middle East war. They want decisive action and rapid disengagement. The ceasefire break and the American military response together create a fork. Escalate fully, execute the complete package, achieve decisive results quickly, or continue calibrated pressure and accept that this runs longer than the political appetite for it. Trump has never been a calibrated pressure campaign decision maker. Here is what the first-tier strikes did not touch. The ballistic missile production facilities, still operational. The hardened silos and mobile launcher networks, untouched. Fordow, still spinning. Natanz, still operational. The underground enrichment halls that the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator was specifically designed to reach, untouched. The IRGC command posts, where the generals who ordered this morning's gunboat operation are planning their response right now, untouched. The command channels connecting Tehran to Hezbollah, to the Houthi command structure in Yemen, to the militia networks in Iraq, untouched. The first-tier strikes removed Iran's ability to conduct straight harassment operations using its forward infrastructure. They did not remove Iran's ability to retaliate across the full spectrum of its military capability. And it is inside that gap between what was hit and what remains that Iran's retaliation decision is being made right now. 3 options exist inside that room in Tehran. Absorb the strikes, condemn them diplomatically, use international outrage as leverage toward improved negotiating terms, the foreign ministry's preference, the option that keeps the diplomatic track alive, and the one the IRGC hardliners will call capitulation. Activate the proxy networks, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias, to impose cost on American interests and partners without direct confrontation. The middle option, degraded and watched, but available. Or direct retaliation against American assets, ballistic missiles at carrier groups, at the Gulf bases, at the air installations in Qatar and Bahrain from which American aircraft are operating. The option the IRGC hardliners want. The option most likely to trigger the complete infrastructure package Trump described. Every power plant, every bridge. The morning after that retaliation looks very different for Iran than any previous morning in this crisis. The supreme leader knows this. Whether the IRGC hardliners defer to the supreme leader's judgment, that is the internal power struggle determining what happens in the next 24 hours. Oil opened up $14 in Asian trading. Shipping insurance for Gulf transit jumped more than 200% in the first 4 hours after maritime operators received word. Several major carriers have suspended Gulf bookings, and pending security assessment is industry language for. We think it gets worse before it gets better. In Beijing, leadership is updating its calculation. The teapot refineries in Shandong province that have been the economic lifeline keeping Iran's regime viable are watching a supply chain that was already stressed and is now facing resumed military activity. An uncomfortable Beijing is a Beijing that may have something to say to Tehran that changes the response calculus more than any American ultimatum has managed to. They fired on commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. No ambiguity. America answered with precision strikes on the infrastructure that made those vessels vulnerable. Not the full package, a message. Now, two voices are coming out of Tehran simultaneously. One wants to talk, one wants to fight. Someone wins that argument in the next 24 hours, and what they decide determines whether the back channel to Islamabad stays open or closes forever. The nuclear clock is still running. Oil is up $14. Shipping has stopped. And somewhere in a building you cannot photograph, a small number of men are choosing between a phone call and a launch command. When the next development breaks, and it will break within 48 hours, this channel will be the first place to explain what it actually means, not just what was said. If you're not subscribed, tap that button right now. And if one person in your circle is following this crisis, send them this video. Because the next decision lands before most people even know this one was made. Don't be that person.